It was a different time back then for us, remember. I mean, when I said I wanted to play the drums, my father looked at me and like, what do you want to be, a bum for the rest of your life? You know, it was like, you're going to be digging ditches for the rest of your life. What, are you kidding me? You want to play, you know, because nobody played instruments. I mean, up until the Beatles, it was like insane to say you wanted to play an instrument. So that being said, my friends got instruments for Christmas. I mean, but they weren't great things. I had a tempo set of drums that were bought in a Times Square store and, you know, stuff like that. And my friends had Kent guitars. I don't even think they exist anymore. And, you know, we started a little band and just tried to play. The hook that we had, though, was that a friend of ours, we were in the backyard of a friend's house, and a kid from our school came walking in, and he had the same haircut like Paul McCartney had. And he was wearing a black trench coat. He had all black on it. And it was like, oh my God, he looks like he comes from England. His name was Mike Cody. And we just said, hey, can you play an instrument? And he said, no. And we said, you want to be in a band? And he said, yeah. And his father bought him a guitar. So what happened was his father was the president of the Teamsters Union in New York City. The truck drivers union, right? So every time they had a function, we would play, and we'd play instrumentals, you know, we'd play like the Ventures songs and stuff like that. And we had a captive audience because they couldn't leave. And then they'd pass around the hat, you know, and that's how we first made money. I was 15 years old. Yeah, the way I got the gig with Billy was I had a band with the bass player. You know, the band was called Topper, and we were doing all original materials. And at the time, the sound man who was working for Billy knew the bass player. So he got Doug Stegmeyer, the bass player, in Topper, the gig to go on tour with Billy for the Street Life Serenade tour. You know, he had Piano Man and Street Life Serenade out. And at the time, Billy was living in LA, recording albums, using studio musicians, but taking a different band on the road with him. And during that tour, he told Doug, he said, I want to get a band, I want to move back to New York City, I want to get a band that goes in the studio with me and also tours with me, the same band tours with me, and I want a New York style drummer. I want one that hits hard and is very aggressive. And Doug said, well, I got the guy, you know the guy, you know. And so he got me the gig with Billy. We went in the studio to record the album that became Turnstiles, and during that album, when we listened back to the tracks, Billy would say, you know, I'd like to have some guitar on this track, you know, stuff like that. And we said, well, we know guitar players. So eventually all of Topper, through the relationships of us, and all became Billy's band. Myself, Doug Stegmeyer, Russell Javers, and Howie Emerson became Billy's first touring band and recording band. Yeah, well, I asked Doug, first of all, what's Billy into? Because I didn't want to just know his songs, his material. I wanted to know what he was into beyond that. And Doug told me, go buy Captain Fantastic by Elton John, because Billy loves that album. So when I went to the audition, I played all of Billy's songs, you know, and then he said to me, he said, I wrote some new songs and they're going to be, I'm going to be recording them. What would you do with them? And these are the songs that eventually became the Turnstiles album. And he was amazed at how fast I came up with stuff. And he didn't know for like 25 years that Doug had slipped me a tape of all the new material. And I got to tell you, when I was a kid, I was into the Young Rascals, you know, Felix Cavalier, Dino Danelli, Eddie Brigatti, and Gene Cornish. And I had the opportunity to meet them. I was 15 years old, young drummer, you know, from Long Island. They played at a high school next to my town. And when I met them, they were so nice to me that it totally changed the way I looked at rock musicians. It was like, wow, regular guys can really make it in this thing. And I thought it was just nice that they talked to me, that I wasn't just some kid that was 15 years old. Like, I was a fan of theirs, and they appreciated that. I mean, Dino Danelli taught me how to twirl the drumsticks, and this is in the classroom in Massapequa High School, you know, Montauk High School. So that was great. So I took that, and that's why I hang out at these camps, because I can do the clinic and then leave. You know, I mean, Rich says whatever you want to do, you can do. But I think like hanging out and you have a little communication with them, and you have a little humor with them, and they get a good time. I think that's what they remember more than the clinic, you know, because they know how I play. They've seen videos and stuff like that. So it's cool. That's why I like to hang out. You know, it's funny. The questions that people ask me, how do you get an endorsement? Well, actually, the number one question back in the day when now the kids are so young, they don't remember the time, but they used to ask me all the time, what does Christy Brinkley really look like in person? That was the number one question, you know. No, they ask, how did you do what you did, you know, to get where you got? You know, how did you get with Billy? And it's an interesting story because if you listen to Billy, he's like classically trained. He took piano lessons and he's classically trained. And I'm the street drummer, no lessons, just listens to the sounds of the street. You know, a train goes by, I can hear the tick, 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 as a rhythm. You know, you step on something and you hear it go, you know, you try to time it and you get all the rhythm. So I think that combination, Billy had the great songs and the great melodies, but myself and the band brought it to street level so people can hear it. A good drummer will borrow, a great drummer will steal. You know, that's what we all do. We all steal. I mean, drums are made up of like single stroke rolls, pop, 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 double stroke rolls, that, and riffs. I mean, roughs. Right? So there's only three things you can actually do on the drums. Everything is made up of that. So yeah, like the beginning of Only Good Die Young is actually the beginning of Up From the Skies by Jimi Hendrix. Let's see, what else did I rip off? I had a girlfriend when we were doing Turnstiles, and she loved Joni Mitchell. She loved the song Help Me, and she thought John Gurin, who played drums on that, was the greatest drummer in the world. And Help Me goes, help me out, right? We go in the studio, we're recording Summer Highland Falls. It's either sadness or euphoria. Dun, dun, bra, boom, bra, boom, boom, boom. Just for her. The Liberty style, I like that. Liberty style. We're going to coin that phrase. The Liberty style was from not being able to read, not being able to write music. So when I heard something on a record, I couldn't like, oh, he's doing this, let me jot it down, you know. Or if a book came out by that artist, I didn't know what the notes were. They were like bugs on a page. So I would have to listen to what he was doing and then try to figure it out. And basically everything I tried to figure out, I figured out wrong. And it became my style of doing something, you know, because I developed a feel by playing to records. That's how I learned how to play, was playing to Ringo and stuff like that. Developed a feel. And then to have this stuff in between that nobody heard before, that's kind of similar, but it's new, you know. That's how I developed that whole thing, you know. I mean, I had great teachers by listening. You know, Ringo Starr, Dino Donnelly. Nigel Olsson was a great one. I actually sat, because we did 10 years of Billy Joel and Elton John on tour, and I sat with Nigel once, and you know, he does Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. He rides on the cymbal. Don't, you know, when I think of those eastern nights. And then when I did Honesty, when Billy's singing, if you look for tenderness, I'm riding on the cymbals too. So I said to Nigel, I said, as a student of Nigel Olsson, how am I doing? And he said, not bad, not bad. And then I said, well, who did you listen to? And he said his two favorites were Bobby Elliott from the Hollies and B.J. Wilson from Procol Harum. And he said, talk about ripping things off. He said the fill in Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, that triplet fill, doom, 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 don't let the sun. B.J. Wilson did that all the time with Procol Harum. He said, that's where I got that from. Your groove is your pants, right? You're ready to go out at night, and you put on this great pair of pants. That's your groove. You're looking good, you look in the mirror. Now I got to put on a shirt. These are your fills. You go to the closet, you open up the closet, there's 75 shirts in there. Not every one of those shirts are going to fit with that groove. You know, you got to find the right one to fit with that groove. It's really interesting listening to these guys talk, the Nashville guys, because it's so different than how we do things in New York.
How's that?
Well, everything is like charted out. When they talk about like, we heard the demo, and I charted the demo, and they wanted it exactly like the demo. It's like, when I was listening to Jimmy was it yesterday, right? Jimmy Riley, yeah. When he was talking about how he approaches the song and what he has, information he has when he goes in, I thought to myself, this is going to be perfect, because I go in with a guy that not only does he not know what he wants, but sometimes he doesn't even have the whole song yet, and we have to start from nothing. You know, it's totally different. So